Good morning. Hello, everyone. Welcome to day two of the Within Health Summit. I will give everyone just a second to join us. We had a really successful day one yesterday, so I am happy to be with you all again today. Another day filled with amazing presentations and opportunities to learn not only from the Within Health staff, but some of our partners and some of our community leaders and just other mental health professionals and advocates that have a passion for this work. So it is our pleasure to join you. So we will officially go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are logging in from. My name is Jamie Singletary, and I am the Director of Clinical Brand Development for Within Health. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to day two of the 2024 Within Health Summit. And this morning, we are going to kick it off with my colleague, Erin Kowalski, who will be talking with Monica Ostroff of Meta. We were just having this conversation, depending on how you prefer to pronounce it. And they have lots of information that they are going to share. And so welcome today. And I'm turning it over to you, Erin and Monica.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate you. Thanks for coming on this morning. So I feel so lucky to be here with Monica. Monica, I've known you for years now, and I'm just excited for this conversation. I know we've done a lot of talks between me and you. We've done Instagram Live, which was a blast. So I'm excited to have this platform to talk about our topic today, which is building hope, nonprofits in the fight against eating disorders. And I feel very lucky to be here with you to have this conversation. So I would like to start by talking about what does hope mean to you, mean to Meta, and what that looks like.
Yeah, well, first, thank you for having me. It's nice to be able to be here with you and to just be here with everyone. So thank you for that. And hope, what does hope mean to me and to Meta? To me, hope is sort of having a vision for the future, a vision and that things can be better than they currently are, that there can be change that feels good to people. I think about how challenging it can be for people to hold on to that when they're engaged in a pretty big struggle in their life. And so sometimes hope is really big and has a lot of fun visions attached to it for how someone envisions their future to look and to be, including their health, their mental health, their well-being. And sometimes people get really tired, right? Because it can be a long struggle. And sometimes hope looks like just showing up. And sometimes hope looks like your providers and your friends holding it for you. But there's always somebody that has a vision for how things can be different and better.
And how does the work at Meta align with that, right? Because what you're saying is leaning on others to get to where you need to get to. Because when you are in that struggle and needing that higher level of care, just needing support or understanding where to go and what that looks like, to me, like that's what Meta does, right? Is provide that because it's so overwhelming. And I think speaking as a therapist in the field, it can be overwhelming understanding what levels of care are, what treatment options are. And then
Yeah.
we think about the people that are actually in the community trying to find that support. And I know Meta, you cover everything. You cover the providers, the patients, the community. So I'd love for you to discuss that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, we try to be really responsive to the community. Now, what does the community need? And then how can Meta meet that need or be at least part of that need being met? And we have, for people who don't know us, we kind of have a couple of different things that we do. So we train providers who treat folks who struggle with eating disorders. So we have a big national conference, and then we have multiple training opportunities throughout the year. And it's nice because we can come together as a community of providers at the conference to share what we all know. And there's this combination of lived experience voices that are pretty diverse, at least at this point in time, and hoping for even more diverse voices in that conference. And there becomes this ripple effect, right? The more people that train and we learn from people who are people of color, people from the LGBTQ identifications, people in higher weight bodies, how can we, as a provider community, really meet the needs of our actual clients? Because they're not all cis white thin, right? So we need more voices there. And for the clients, we also provide direct services. We provide individual, group, and family therapy, primarily individual and group. And we've worked really hard, and we continue working really hard to try to meet the needs of individuals. And so for us, we talked about this actually recently, like typically nobody has just an eating disorder, right? Like we know 90% of people who have eating disorders have a trauma history, 50% meet criteria for PTSD, for example. So making sure that our clinicians have training to be able to treat the whole person. I think we're moving away from, or I hope we're moving away from the days where we're referring people out to 6 different providers to meet their needs, that where this person's going over here to get treatment for OCD and over here for PTSD and over there for substance abuse and over here for an eating disorder, that getting our clinicians trained. So we have several that are trained in EMDR, for example, to be able to manage trauma symptoms and help trauma healing. So can we do that all in-house? And can we also help other providers do that by training group practices, et cetera? And then we have fun events,
Yeah, fun events, absolutely. I love that you brought that up though, because, and that's something that I see on the kind of backside, right? So doing outreach and business development, I work a lot of times with families and patients who need care. And a theme that I keep seeing often is that hesitation of, within health, it's an eating disorder program, but I have trauma, I have OCD. Like, is that something? And I also find that a lot of times patients have kind of the shame around bringing that up, where just identifying it's not just an eating disorder, I have an eating disorder and I think what you're saying is just having those conversations outwardly in the community. I think that's a great way of addressing that head on.
I mean, I was doing a training recently, and there were multiple providers that were saying, we've been taught when in doubt, refer out. Like I heard that specific phrase a bunch of times. And so they were talking about their reluctance to try to treat folks that have eating disorders. And it's, in my opinion, like get consultation, get training, because the relationship between the therapist and the client is so incredibly important. I mean, we know just from research alone that the relationship is 30% of what drives change forward. It doesn't matter the type of modality that the therapist is using, but 30% of change comes from the strength and the rapport and how you get along with each other. So if we're sort of, quote, throwing that out because a client is coming in with another diagnosis that we're not 100% comfortable with, it's an opportunity to learn and expand our skill set, not send a client away. Because I hear that, I haven't done them in a little bit and need to get back to doing some Instagram lives, but that's what the clients talk about. They talk about their fear of saying, hey, I have a lot of PTSD symptoms, or, I'm really, really struggling with my OCD in addition to my eating disorder. My eating disorder has gotten to a point where I could really use a higher level of care or more services. And I'm so afraid to talk about it because they're going to say they don't treat that and I can't come. Or, I have a new therapist and I'm just starting to get along really well with that person. I'm really hopeful for where this is going to go. But I know that this other diagnosis I have is not that person's specialty area, and I don't want them to dump me. And it's such a real palpable fear, and it happens, so how can we prevent that? How can we get information out to providers and skill sets out to providers so we can really treat the whole person?
And what have you found in ways of doing that? So I know it's the trainings they do, it's the big conference. What are you hearing from the community of providers? Is the interest there of being open to learning outside of eating disorder?
Yeah. It's been really fun. For whatever reason, I've had a lot of requests this fall for trainings from group practices, school health centers, college health centers, et cetera. So I've gotten an opportunity to have these conversations a lot with therapists and health center staffs and that sort of thing. And it's been interesting when I've presented information around, just the incredible rate of co-occurring disorders that people struggle with when they have an eating disorder. And when I suggest this whole, instead of, continuing to go to webinars, what if you took some of those funds and you got consultation? and you got supervision to be able to provide care and to, excuse me, to expand your skill set that way. And it's been really fascinating because people, by the end of the training, people have been incredibly receptive and have said, you know, I have people on my caseload right now that I was thinking about referring out. And I think I'm not going to do that because I realize that the relationship is so incredibly important. And I mean, therapists and clients, we care about each other, right? If you're a therapist and you don't care about your client, you're in the wrong field. Like, we all care about our clients. And I know some people get a little funny when you use the word love, but there is love in that relationship, love with boundaries. It's not inappropriate, but if you don't have that, the relationship is pretty hollow and it's very hard for people to make progress. And it's also hard to put that aside to cast, you know, a client out because they have a diagnosis that you don't feel as skilled in treating. So it's been really great to hear people say, I mean, there's a really long wait lists. So if I don't do this, then the person's not going to get care for I don't know how long. And is that ethical? I don't know that it is.
Yeah,
And
I personally was a part of a meta consultation group for eating disorder providers, therapists, and dietitians, and it was so helpful. And I think even when you're in a private practice, you don't realize that solo effect of not being able to rely on a team. And I think a lot of people moving forward are going into that private practice because the need is there. But with that, it's understanding, and I'm not sure if we have, you know, a lot of outpatient providers here, but I just want to acknowledge that importance of, like you're saying, Monica, of seeking that consultation because we need it, right? It's bouncing ideas, bouncing thoughts. Even if you are a specialist in eating disorders, there's still going to be those moments where you're in session, you're like, did I say the right thing? Where do I go from here? I'm hitting a stuck point. And to be able to have these conversations, and I know within the community up here in Boston, there are a lot of consultation groups that have been started through Meta. So first off, I just want to say personally, thank you. And just gathering that network of the community to just acknowledge that we all want to continue to learn and grow and that we don't know it all, right? Like, you guys set that tone and then we're kind of taking and running with it, but we're so grateful for that opportunity.
I love the fact that in our, like in the meta community as a whole, it seems like the vast majority of our professional community, we recognize very much that we're all human.
Imagine.
You know, and we're right. Well, I mean, sometimes you go places and it feels like there's this expectation that you're sort of like perfect, you're like healthy in all respects. And we all struggle with things. Like, nobody's life is perfect and no one is perfect. And I think when we can all meet each other in that space of being really human with our vulnerabilities and authenticity, we become better providers. And we start to thrive differently, and so do our clients. And it's been fun, exciting, and really hopeful to be able to bring different training opportunities and different topics for training into the professional community. So, and it's benefited people. I mean, I think about this past year's conference in May, Rachel Milner and I got to do the presentation on DID and eating disorders, or the intersection of DID and eating disorders. And we had 150 people that came to that session. And it was really interesting and beautiful to be able to show people the statistics of how prevalent DID is, because people thought it was rare. So if you think about it, 90% of people have trauma history, 50% meet criteria for PTSD. We know 40% of people with DID and OSDD have eating disorders. Statistically, they're in everybody's practice. And yet we've never been trained on how to treat it. So being able to bring that in and show people what the warning signs are, not warning signs is sort of a bad thing, but like, what are the sort of flags? Like, what are the indicators that this might be going on for somebody? We've had multiple people contact us to say, it was amazing to be able to get that information. And I finally figured out that there is an individual on my caseload that I've been working with for 10 years who has been very stuck, who actually meets criteria, had them assessed formally. They're getting care for their DID and dissociation in addition to their eating disorder, and they're starting to do better. we've had clients reach out to say, hey, I just want to say my therapist went to the training and I've actually gotten a different diagnosis now and things are getting better for me. And I've been struggling for 20 years.
And I think a lot of time it's providers don't have the knowledge and or how do you ask the questions, right? Because we can do the research and look up the diagnosis for DID, but then it's how do I move forward and identifying, like you're saying, the indicators? How do you have those conversations? What are you looking for? So providing that information just opens up the ability to provide that accurate care.
It's one of those things I wish that we had gotten lots of training for in grad school, but none of us did because we were all told that it was rare, and yet it's more prevalent than many other disorders. And people are shocked by that. When people don't, we all learned about schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and the prevalence for schizophrenia, for example, is 0.7. For DID, it's 1.5.
So would you
Anorexia is
say,
less.
right, and the idea of like building hope, it's just hope of providing just the reality of what's out there to arm providers for that knowledge, right? Of being able to provide the most effective and accurate treatment.
So much hope and excitement for the future because I do really feel like we are shifting where we're all working to be more authentically ourselves as providers and clients and really work to remove some of the stigma, which is another barrier to care. We have been working really hard, not just Meta, but everybody, all of the other nonprofits, all of the treatment centers, and so many providers. How do we make eating disorder care more inclusive in terms of culture, race, diverse body shapes and sizes, and also various diagnoses? How do we, instead of shooting for one population and missing the majority, like we're really working hard, I think, to be as inclusive and diverse as possible in care delivery.
And how beautiful is that? And I think that's what we all want, right? That is our goal as programs, as providers, is to be more inclusive and really understand how to meet the needs. What would you say are tactics that you all are doing? And I know there's different platforms, right? For Instagram, you guys have 9,000 followers and lean heavy into providing resources through that and, grabbing people's attention of like, this is what we do and who we are. But for other programs or nonprofits, what would be some advice you have for them in order to kind of continue on that path that you're saying?
There's a beautiful nonprofit community. We, a couple of years back, formed the Collaborative for Eating Disorder Organizations. So there are 24, 25 organizations that are part of that. So really collaborating and working together is, I think, what elevates us all. Making sure that everybody has all of the information that they need. And the nice thing about the nonprofit world, in my opinion, is we get to know what each other is really good at. And we network so that we can also send people who are coming to us to nonprofits. So Joanna, for example, who's the CEO of the Alliance, Joanna runs so many therapist-led support groups that are completely free. And when people are looking for them, absolutely, that is a place that we refer people to right off the bat. She has far more groups than we do in terms of free groups, excellent at doing that. She, on the other hand, will send people our way if they're looking for the 8-week groups or for some online services. We have a recovery community that has a message board if people are looking for peer support that's moderated and safe. So and Rock Recovery is another nonprofit that's very similar to Meta in terms of providing direct care services. We meet together and share resources. How are you managing insurance? These are some of my tips and tricks. Like, what are yours? And making sure that we're really working together to do that. I think it's collaboration.
Yeah, that is so important. And I always am filled with gratitude whenever I'm able to connect with a family or a patient and they're looking for just outpatient services or just extra supports. And I have a full list that I can send them of like, these are great organizations that can provide that service and care. And I can't imagine what the eating disorder community and world landscape would look like if we didn't have these nonprofits that you mentioned. That's why we're so grateful, and the work that you're doing is making such an impact. So I hope you know that. And I would love for you to review the services that Meta does provide, just so everyone is aware, and then any updates that you have going on. I think that'd be important to highlight.
Here's hoping I don't forget any, right? So we have our clinical arm of Meta that does individual, group, family, couples therapy. And we also have, I'm trying to think what else we do. We have a couple of free drop-in groups. And we also have an online message board where people get peer support. The online message board also does have free videos, webinars, worksheets, sort of like guided activities that are recovery based. And the message board itself has different forums attached to it. So there's like getting unstuck or introductions, or I'm trying to think. I think there's one for substance use and eating disorders. Like there's little niche areas where people can connect there. Over 30, that kind of thing. For professionals, we have a professional membership and lots of folks who come to our national conference. We do networking with a purpose that you all know fairly well. We usually do them around every other Friday at lunch with treatment center sponsors, and it's a different professional topic. We have, in terms of the professional membership, multiple, I don't even know how many we actually have going at this point, but we have multiple peer support groups where therapists and dietitians can meet together to do peer supervision with each other. We also offer professional consultation and training, so individual supervision and consultation for therapists, and also formal trainings for schools, group practices, other therapists who are looking to increase their skills around treating eating disorders. We are also doing some training in some intersecting specialty areas that we have. So Ruth does a lot of work around trauma, PTSD, and eating disorders and folks in higher weight bodies. I do a lot on autism, substance use, and DID. What else do we do? We have some fun events for the community coming up. I know April 3rd, we have a music event celebrating our 30th year. Can't believe we're 30.
Wow.
Our national conference is May 1st and 2nd this year. So I'm certain I'm forgetting something.
I mean, that is a list in itself. Have you found that there are more, 30 years, wow, more providers interested in getting trained in eating disorders as time's gone on?
I think people are getting less intimidated by it.
Okay.
What I've found is people are scared about what could happen, so they shy away from it, or they're concerned about the level of kind of case management that can come with it. So when they figure out that it's really manageable and they start to learn more about how to keep people safe and how to really be able to communicate in a way that's efficient and effective with the rest of the team, then people are really interested in it. I mean, people who have eating disorders are some of the most sensitive, amazing, wonderful humans I've ever had the privilege of working with. And when they start to have that experience too, they kind of get hooked on it. You can't not.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great way of saying it. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that's a message that I want to just reiterate is if there's any providers who are thinking about just learning more or dipping your toe into eating disorder treatment, I think it's something that's worth trying. And there are so many opportunities through Meta within offers monthly free educational CEs with a variety of topics tied to eating disorders. There's a whole landscape of being able to get those trainings. So definitely don't be afraid. Come join the eating disorder side of things.
Definitely.
And then, so Monica, so I know Meta has been 30 years. You've been in the field for over 25 and have done a plethora of different levels of care. I think every one at this point.
Yep.
What made you lean into Meta?
Becky Manley and honestly, Becky Manley and Leslie Bernstein.
Those the people. Okay, I get it.
But the funny part about it is, I don't know if you know this or not. So I've known Becky since like 1992. We used to volunteer for the same nonprofit organization back in the day that was called ABC Inc. So that's where I first met Becky. It was also where I first met Beth Mayer. Beth Mayer was my first supervisor back in the day. And in many ways, I'd always been involved with Meta. I had done presentations at I think Meta was the first professional conference that I had ever presented with in like 1997, I want to say. It was a long time ago. And I've done supervision and different consultations for their staff, and have just been involved throughout the years. Meta's always been my favorite conference. I've always loved the feel of it. I've always loved the fact that Meta was the place that was willing to try something different if someone had an idea, to see how it would go. It's always been the place where you could come and kind of feel like you could take your shoes off and put your feet up and feel at home. It's a very laid back, open, friendly place to be, where people really are cheering each other on and building each other up. So, you know, when Beth Mayer retired and they were looking for an executive director and we had the conversation, it was like, yes, please, this will be a blast. And it's been phenomenal. It's just been really amazing to be connected with the community in a really different way than from when I was leading partial inpatient and IOP programs. Or private practice. I did that too back in the day.
You've done them all. And
At
what do
this
you want
point,
to see? What do you want to see for the future for Meta? Like, what are some of the dream goals?
well, I think to be honest, so much of that is really continuing to see what the needs are and where does our skill set plug in to be able to meet the needs of the community. So we've had a lot of fun of listening to who people want to hear from and being able to provide that platform. So having diverse voices in Eating Disorders Awareness Week, for example, providing a panel of professionals with all diverse backgrounds and body sizes to talk about building care and supporting themselves while they're delivering care. And at the same time, having a lived experience panel with, you know, multiple intersecting marginalized identities and voices talking about what it's like to be them on their quest for healing. It's just been great to listen to. What are people needing? Where are the gaps, and where can we fill in those gaps?
And I feel similar in that way, but on the treatment side of things, right? So within being able to like really provide that customized and individualized care, right? So that not one size fits all mentality.
Yeah.
Creating a treatment plan for each patient, you know, I think it's a new way of providing care and services, and it's been incredible to see how that plays out and makes such a difference.
I think one place that I see us doing significant work, because we already are, is really in what that space that we were talking about before of how can we help providers treat the whole person, and how can we ensure our clients are being fully treated for all of the various diagnoses and symptoms that they might have. And it's been really fun to do that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And then a question that I have for you, which I would love your opinion on, is, you know, what I do and what you all do as well is getting people connected to services. Those are some tough conversations and tricky ones to navigate. And I know outpatient providers are in that same place of holding those conversations. What have you learned over the years to really help manage that really delicate space that those patients are in, and those outpatient providers who have a hard time like managing those patients that need higher level of care but might not be interested, and you know it's a difficult place to sit in.
Well, to make sure that I'm understanding the question, because I think my brain went someplace different, sorry. So in terms of, are you talking about the client who could really benefit from a higher level of care services, but is reluctant to engage at that level of care, or doesn't potentially have access? Because there are so many people that may need that, but don't have access for different reasons.
Go to the second.
Okay. Well, because, you know, I do feel really strongly about client self-determination. So people do get to choose what they do with themselves. And there are many clients that have really good reasons for not wanting to engage in higher levels of care, sometimes because they've had difficult experiences. But I found too that for those who are able to access it, despite previous, maybe not great experiences, when you can do things like help them network and connect them with providers. I mean, you know, how many people have I sent to you like, Erin, can you talk to this person? And once they connect and they get to see who you are and what you do, that can often change. So we're sitting in the hard space of keeping them safe, which means medical monitoring, motivational interviewing. What can I accomplish in this space? How can we make some progress, or at least how can we stabilize, right? Well, we're working towards that higher level of care, but there are the other people, right, who are like, nah, not doing it, not doing it. And I also don't have access because maybe I'm a single mom and I have 2 little kids and I have no one around who can take care of my kids.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna get the state involved in my children because I might need care for my eating disorder, and I can still provide care safely for my children, right? Or, I have to work in order to have insurance. If I don't work, I won't have insurance. And then it becomes a moot point because my insurance isn't going to cover that higher level of care.
Yeah.
And for those folks, I mean, frankly, you guys have been great in that space because you're so flexible that those people are usually able to take advantage of your services, which is wonderful. And for people who, for other reasons, maybe can't, it's being able to think out of the box and put things together until either they stabilize and get better, or they maybe don't even need the higher level of care anymore because they have made progress. So sometimes those thinking out of the box, it always comes down to safety, right? Having that physician that you're working closely with to make sure we have medical stabilization. Do I know what I'm looking for if a client's starting to get into trouble? And what are our treatment goals that are manageable for right now? And where's support for me as a provider while I'm managing something that's difficult, whether that's peer supervision, consultation, and certainly having a really strong team. And being patient, sometimes I think we can get anxious. We look at the acuity that somebody is in and we're like, oh my God, you've got to go like right now because I'm anxious about what's going on in your body and for you emotionally. And sometimes we do have to take a really deep breath, practice the skills that we know, and be patient. Make sure safety is there. Safety is number one, right? So make sure that safety is in place. And methodically, slowly and surely, with lots and lots of compassion, work towards the goal.
And I love what you said too, because I think there's a lot of provider anxiety that goes into it. And it's that seeking consultation, seeking support, and also what you're mentioning, finding, if you're referring to the higher level of care, the roles that I have, right, doing outreach. It's such a pivotal opportunity because we can be there to support the therapist. We can be there to support the family for the patient, right? Because it is overwhelming, especially if it's just one-on-one work. It's the outpatient provider telling the patient this is what they need. When you pull in an outreach member from programs, it helps provide that different conversation. And we can paint the picture of the program, right? Of, let's say, those barriers of why they can't come in. We can have those conversations with them. So I always just reiterate for providers to get familiar with the programs that are local, get familiar with the people who are the go-to contacts, because it is a great resource to use and utilize.
One of the most beneficial things, if you know who does what well in terms of facilities, when you need to make referrals, and exactly that, the warm handoff makes all the difference in the world to the client. But I think it also helps treatment centers also know a little bit more about the client that might be coming in, and it definitely makes the client and the family feel more comfortable about the decision.
Yeah. So with all the services that Meta provides, I mean, it's you're covering all the bases, right? So it's the clinical service for the individual, the clinical service for the families, education in the community, training professionals. What has been, I would love for you just to highlight some of the positive feedback they've experienced, or just the reviews of how Meta has impacted providers or patients. I would love for you to share some of that, if any of them come to mind.
We've been really fortunate to have people who are willing to share their positive experiences. And I think it just really fills your cup. There's a video that's actually on our website at metainc.org where some of our clients are talking about some of their experiences. And it's been, I think about like 8-week groups ending. I actually had an 8-week group that turned into a 3-year group. Like those kind of things happen, which was phenomenal because like the group just stayed together and just kept growing. It was an embodied group, which were for folks who had binge eating disorder, who live in higher weight bodies. And it was such an amazing group of people to work with, and listening to them talk about just their own personal growth as a result of being together in that group and working towards recovery and healing in a different way. Like, I still think back about that, and it's one of the best experiences I've had in my career. I think we get lovely reviews about people who have individual therapy with us, with different clinicians that are there. I was just thinking about a lovely one that I heard about, Jenna, who's one of our clinicians recently, a client who was talking about how nice it is to be able to talk about anything and everything and feel supported, and watching their recovery kind of move forward in her personality. And also just the professionals, like, it's really fun when I get some written feedback, evaluations for trainings that you do, and people who find them engaging and dynamic, and helping them think out of the box and change how they practice, and feeling, especially for generalists who are saying, I think I can do this. Now I feel much more confident. I was scared. I didn't want to try. I was afraid that I was going to hurt somebody. And now I feel like I can do this. And having somebody take a training from you and say, I feel like I can do it, that's all you need.
Oh, it's the best. That's
Like,
it. That's all you want. Yeah. That's amazing. And then also and correct me if I'm saying this wrong, is the Hope Inspiration that you guys host?
yeah.
Those are
So we're going to
lovely.
change the platform on that. This is exciting news. Like, starting in November, we're going to transition Hope and Inspiration to the Instagram platform.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
I think
awesome.
we're going to try it out and see what happens. I think it may be more accessible to people.
Yeah.
I mean, I find you've been on them with me. I find like the community is really pretty engaged. There's a pretty lively chat going on the whole time, and it's a very supportive one with questions that come in. And I think, yeah, I'm looking forward to trialing that.
I love that. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I know we have about a little over 5 minutes left. Is there any questions or anything that anyone wants to pop in and ask? We'd be happy to answer anything. The chat box should be able to be utilized, so please feel free to do so. But Monica, I love, and especially what you talk about in the beginning, of being able to really understand that we're not just treating eating disorders. We're treating the person as a whole, and a lot of times it's very complex. And being able to use all the resources that are out there, there's incredible trainings, right? To really make sure that
Yeah.
we're confident, because that's the reality of what we're seeing.
I think too, when we, as providers, when we're leading with compassion, it makes all the difference in the world. So if we're compassionately connected and attuned with our clients as we're doing the work, then treating the whole person feels a whole lot less intimidating. We can trust ourselves a little bit more. And I think our clients really appreciate that.
Yeah, and even just allowing them to have space to talk about what it is that they're feeling and thinking, and not just feeling like they have to stick on one topic.
I'm glad you said that. Actually, I was in this really interesting conversation recently with people who had the idea that delivering care for folks with eating disorders was just talking only about food and bodies, and that's it. I'm like, I feel like everybody would quit therapy if that's all we talked about. Like, could you bring in their whole life?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I think we do have some questions. Oh, can we go over stats again? Monica, can you highlight the ED patients with DID?
Yeah. So, well, I can give you a whole bunch of stats because I have a number disorder. I don't really know why, but I just remember stats for some reason. So I had found it really interesting how prevalent it is. So DID is 1 to 1.5% of the global population, with some studies showing it as high as 3.5%. So 3.5% is about as prevalent as people with red hair, for example. 6.6% of people in inpatient settings have DID, and 5.5% in outpatient settings have DID. That doesn't include OSDD1, and OSDD1A and 1B are almost identical to DID. They're just missing a component. So like type A doesn't have well-differentiated parts, but it has amnesia. Type B has well-differentiated parts and no amnesia, for example. When you add those in, it's really high. It's 4.2% of people have OSDD1. So add that to 1, we'll go the low end, and you get 5.2%. So people who have schizophrenia globally 0.7%, and people with bipolar 1, I believe it is 0.56%. Anorexia for females, 0.19%. I'm blanking on the stat for bulimia, for example. But what I found really fascinating for the DID folks is that the global prevalence for anxiety is 4.3% and depression is 5.2%. It's literally equivalent to people living with complex dissociation. And we're not trained to recognize it because everybody typically has what the media has in their mind, right? So that's what they're looking for, but that's not what people with DID and OSDD look like. It's covert. It's covert for a reason. It's very hard to spot. So, 50% of people, again, with eating disorders have PTSD, 90% with trauma histories, 40% of people with DID have eating disorders. They're in our practices. Yeah. And it takes about 7 years to get a diagnosis because people are typically misdiagnosed first with bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, major depressive disorder. And you'll see folks who have kind of a long list of different diagnoses, lots of different medications that they use. If you are bored and you want to do just a little bit of digging, if you actually Google DID and eating disorders or multiple personality disorder and eating disorders, you'll find journal articles dating back to the 1990s. One that was authored by Catherine Zerbe, who many of you, if you've been in the field for a while, know who she is. There's another one that talked about if folks are not getting better from standard of care for eating disorders, screen them for DID, back then MPD. And they were finding that folks were meeting criteria. So it's really prevalent. They're in our practices. And the more, in my opinion, the more people we're able to identify sooner, the sooner we can get them the care they need, the sooner they're going to get improvement in not just their eating disorder, but their entire life.
Dr. Tim Brewerton, he's a psychiatrist out of South Carolina. He created a documentary on one of his patients with DID, Sylvie, which I've seen. And we are actually doing a screening for it in Miami. So if anyone happens to be in Miami in November, but I can definitely share that information as well with you, Monica, so you have it too.
The best documentaries on DID is actually Petals of a Rose. It was done by a woman who has DID and her son, who's a filmmaker, and folks with lived experience say that is the most accurate portrayal they've ever seen. And it's free. You can watch it both on YouTube or on dylancrumpler.com, I think is where Petals of a Rose is kind of housed, but highly recommend it.
Awesome. Thank you. We have one more question. Do you have any advice on navigating the new ICD-10 codes for eating disorders, which patients will see on their insurance paperwork extension and potentially have the narrative of not sick reinforced based on perceived severity?
Just talking about that yesterday, and it's kind of heartbreaking because I feel like we just totally went backwards. Like we had finally gotten away from all of those specifiers from the DSM. What was it? DSM-3? It was like a while ago that we finally got away from all of those specifiers. And here we are again, which to me, I think, is all about insurance companies. And sometimes, just in general, I mean, I'm thinking back in the day, what we used to do is we used to kind of mostly label almost everybody as moderate, just to talk about the fact that it's only a code in order to get paid. And rather than focus on that modifier, we were putting the code in so that we can continue delivering care and get paid, but needing the person to understand that it's not a competition. And we know how eating disorder sort of voices work. And so for the eating disorder voice, they're all going to be looking for the extreme modifier, which is not going to be helpful for anyone.
Yeah.
I wish they'd ask us before they change codes.
Awesome. Well, I know we are at time. Monica, I can't thank you enough. I appreciate you. I appreciate you as a human, and I appreciate the work that you and Meta are doing. So thank you for your time. And yeah, I'm very grateful for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me today. I really, really appreciate it. It's been fun.
It has been.
Thank you, Aaron and Monica. We appreciate you. And for our attendees, thank you for joining us. Our next session will start at 11 o'clock, and I am excited to share that it will be with Dr. Nicholas Farrell of NOCD and Dr. Wendy Oliver Pyatt discussing the comorbidities in eating disorder patients, OCD, and other issues that arise when
It's
clients
gonna
are
be a good one. It's gonna be a very good one.
going to be an excellent one.
Good.
So we'll see you in just a few minutes. Thank you and have a good day.
Bye, everyone.